In this lesson, we're gonna talk about your bad habits. But the good news is, anytime I talk about bad habits with people, they already know what theirs are. Maybe your bad habit is you overspend, or you overeat, or you're impatient with people, or you're late for something, or you always let this thing down or that thing fall apart, or whatever is going on. We all got bad habits. And the good news is you don't have to feel bad about them anymore. Because today, we're gonna explain why they happen, and we're gonna explain where they happen, and we're gonna explain one simple thing to overcome those bad habits. So we got a lot to cover here. My attempt today is I'm gonna boil them all down into 4 categories. So I'd love you just to start by brainstorming any bad habits you have, and let's see if we can pinpoint where they are and why they're happening. A bad habit, by definition, is something that's negative and enduring. A habit, right? You keep doing it and it's almost like automatically, like you're not even thinking about it. That's a habit. You've done it so many times, it's automatic. It's a response, it's easy. You just fall right into that thing. So we've got to interrupt that bad habit, put something more positive and something more enduring in its place. Because I'm sure by now you know how habits are formed, right? Something happens, we react to it with a routine, and we feel like we're paid off by it. There's a payoff, there's a benefit. And after a period of time, we just do something over and over and over and over again, and it becomes easy or natural, i.e. a habit. But here's what I discovered about bad habits. There's really 4 types or 4 categories of bad habits. And once we learn to recognize them, awareness is always that first step. So the first step is let's recognize where our bad habits are and where they're coming from. I bet if you looked at all your list of bad habits, that they all fall into these 4 categories. The first bad habit is bad habits just caused by our desire to protect ourselves, right? A desire to protect ourselves. You know, I don't want to take on that new project, and so I have this bad habit of procrastinating because I'm protecting myself. I feel like if I do it, I'm gonna lose face, I'm gonna fail, something negative will happen. So I've created this little payoff called procrastination. That procrastination, it is protecting me from falling on my face, from looking dumb, right? There's always a payoff to every bad habit. And one of them is that payoff of protection. I don't have to put myself out there. That's the payoff. I don't have to get hurt. That's the payoff. So we create all these habits of, whether it's a habit of perfectionism, where we never actually release anything to the world, so we don't have to be judged. Because being judged, we don't want that, so we protect ourselves. So we think, how can I protect myself? And these bad habits ensue. I want to protect myself, bad habit. Don't put anything out there. Bad habit, not complete the work and release it because they might judge me. But there's a specific thing that's happening here. We're looking to protect ourselves. So are there any habits in your life that you've developed that's a bad habit to protect yourself? Let me give you an example. One bad habit a lot of people have is they don't speak up for themselves. It's just automatic. They have an idea in a meeting, they don't say anything. Someone says something wrong or abusive or mean or negative, they don't say anything. Because it's easier. That habit of not speaking up for ourselves feels like it's protecting us. But we call it a bad habit because over time, it steals away the joy and charge of life. So is that a category you have going on? Are there any bad habits that you identify like, wow, I keep running that same routine to protect myself? And the second big one that we have, big habit, is to pacify our negative feelings. To pacify, right? Categories of pacification. To pacify ourselves, you know, when we feel stress, overwhelm, or even uncertainty of what to do. I know I'm supposed to be doing something, but I don't know what, so I'm gonna pacify myself. Just like if a child is screaming, you give it that pacifier so that it soothes them. Well, so we soothe ourselves with food. We soothe ourselves with social media. We soothe ourselves with distractions. We soothe ourselves with, meaningless conversations or relationships. We are pacifying ourselves because inside we're screaming to do something, but we lack the courage. Or inside we're screaming to change, but we don't really know what to do. So in the meantime, until we either figure out what to do or develop the strength of what to do, we pacify ourselves with all these bad habits. Well, I don't know what to do, or I feel uncertain, so I'm gonna eat. I don't know what to do, or I feel uncertain, so I'll just check in. I'm gonna look at the newspapers here, I'm gonna look at my phone. Or we feel uncertain or insecure, and so we pacify ourselves by seeking validation from other people. Could you tell me how great I am? And we develop all these bad habits of doing things that compromise ourselves just so we can get some validation from some people because we feel insecure. It's important to recognize those bad habits that are really just pacifying a deeper need that says, do something, try something, go. It's so important. The third big category of bad habits comes under placating. Placating. That means we have a bad habit of pleasing other people so that we can cause them less stress, less overwhelm, or get less emotional reaction from them. Like a lot of people, they're like, they would call themselves, they say, Brendon, I'm kind of a doormat. I said, what do you mean you're a doormat? Well, I don't want to cause a ruckus, and I just let people run over me all the time. People are always stepping all over me. And it's because they have a bad habit of not fighting for what they really want, not communicating clearly their expectations, not setting standards. Instead, they don't want to upset their husband, so they don't say anything. It's not about protection, it's about placating him sometimes. It's about placating the people around you to make them feel good, even though it's coming at the cost of your life. That's often a big bad habit, isn't it? That's why we get overwhelmed in the first place, is because we're doing everything for everybody else to make everybody else feel happy and charmed and good at the cost of our own sanity, our own well-being, our own health. And the last big category over and over and over of bad habits is proving ourselves. Bad habits. If you're always arguing, someone says something and you just scream at them and you get anger because you have to prove yourself. It's your ego saying, hey, validate me. Hey, pay attention. Someone cuts you off on the road, you flip them off, you floor it, you cut in front of them, you go, ha, look at me, jerk. You want to prove that you're important. You want to prove that you should be taken seriously. You want to prove that you're somebody who doesn't deserve to be cut off, and you fight, and you fight, and you fight. And so if you can at least begin to identify some of these, maybe just me talking with you here, maybe that helped you identify some habits, and you're like, oh, I'm doing that. So if all we did is help you generate some more understanding or awareness or categorization of your bad habits, we're starting on the right foot. I've found over and over in my life, a lot of people don't know what their bad habits are, and yet they're unhappy. So if you're trying to figure out why you're unhappy, start with what routines you're continually doing that are negative and stick around. Because in there is a way to get some more happiness back. It's right there. And all we have to do is make sure first we're aware of them, and then once we're aware of them, we decide we're gonna break them. We're gonna find a payoff that's above those payoffs. And it's a very simple thing to do. I'm gonna ask you to do one thing, and it's so easy. Whatever your bad habit is, all I want you to do is rehearse overcoming that bad habit. Rehearse it. Because see, what we think is that one day we're just gonna break our bad habits and it's gonna be instantaneous and easy. The thing is, we have to practice overcoming a bad habit to be able to do it in real life. So here's what I mean. What I'd love you to do, if your bad habit is you just pacify yourself with food when you're uncomfortable or unsure, what I'd love you to do is not do what everyone else says. Get rid of all that food, because all that food, and if there's food around you, you're just gonna be fat, right? It's like, well, it's not the food, it's why you're turning to the food. So let's not try and leave the food, and let's practice not going to the food. Let's instead rehearse, okay, how do I deal with this emotion? Instead of going to the food, what's another way I can have the payoff of dealing with the emotion without that thing that's the bad habit, the food as an example. Now what I want you to do is don't wait until next time you're angry or hurt or upset to go to the food. Instead, stand there, looking at the food, say, okay, when was the last time I was really angry, upset, emotional, unsure, insecure, and I went to that bag of potato chips? When was that? Okay, let me remember that. What was that like? Now let me rehearse not going to the food. What else could I do? What routine or behavior could I do instead of the going to the food? Okay, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna open up my journal right next to that dang bag of chips. I'm gonna open up that journal. I'm gonna look at the chips. I'm gonna open the journal, not the chips. Open journal, not chips. Open journal, not chips. Open journal, not chips. And I'm gonna write down, why am I upset? If my highest self was in this situation right now, what would he or she do? Let me ask you that question again. If my highest self was in this situation right now, what would he or she do? And I want you to literally write that out. So what happens with habits is there's a cue, something negative happens. Our response or our routine is also negative, but it feels like it's paying us off. And then we feel horrible for ourselves. So that middle thing, here's what you do. The cue still happens. The cues, my friends, are always going to happen. They're always. If stress or drama from another person drives you in a bad habit, I'm going to tell you, there's always going to be stress and drama from other people. If feeling insecure or unsure always drives that bad habit, guess what? There's always going to be times in your life you're going to feel insecure and unsure. The cues, my friend, are not going to change. They're always going to be there. So your job is, instead of running that routine of that bad habit, is identify what you're trying to do. Am I trying to protect myself right now? Am I trying to pacify myself? Am I trying to placate her? Am I trying to prove myself? And instead, just ask this simple question. What would my highest self do in this situation? You're not going to win every time. You're just not. Sometimes you're going to have the intention to do the new positive thing, but you do the old negative thing. And I'm here to tell you, that's okay. That's life. Our job is not to win every battle. Our job is to win the war. It's to win more battles against those bad behaviors by putting in new things. And you know what's funny? As soon as you put in those new things, guess what they give you? A payoff. When you act as your highest self would in that situation versus going to your protectionist self or your pacifying self or your placating self or that part of you that just feels like you got to prove yourself, you go to a higher realm, your brain gets the payoff. Your brain says, good job, good job, good job, good job. And the more good habits you run, the more your brain says, good job, man, good job, man. And now you have more strength. You have more certainty in yourself. You don't have to lean like a crutch on those bad behaviors to give you some sort of weak payoff. Instead, your brain goes, hey, you know what? Last time we fought this and we won, that felt pretty good. And you start to get momentum establishing new, good, positive habits simply because you said, bad cue, what good would my highest self do? You try that a few times and you start getting momentum to changing your life. Today, in Growth Day, we are taking on the topic of handling conflict better. I know this is such an important topic because sometimes your relationships, they start falling apart. Sometimes some at work has you frustrated. Sometimes you find yourself getting an argument after argument. Sometimes you feel like hooked or triggered emotionally by what other people are doing. And you figure like, how do I handle this better? Because conflict and crises aren't going away, because building relationships are never easy. And so we have to ask the tough questions of how do we get better knowing that those things will always be there? How do we manage our internal state, our own personal development better so that we can be in the moment, be present, and solve things versus making them worse, okay? My first teaching point today will cover the themes of almost everything else I'm going to teach today. So it's 3 simple phrases, okay? 3 simple phrases. If you ask me, Brendon, help me manage conflict better for the rest of my life, you get, 3 phrases. Here is what they are. First phrase is shared future mindset. When we enter conflicts, it's so often we get so myopic. We take things personally and we just want to win. So we want to just crush and trounce the other person and debate them and make them look dumb because our ego wants to be right. And we forget we got to wake up with that person tomorrow morning. Maybe that's your spouse. We got to go to work with that person again tomorrow because it's Tuesday. We got to, see that person again in our neighborhood. We got to, that person who we're about to have a conflict with, they're probably going to be there again. And once we can realize, oh, I'm entering a conflict. This is about to get, heated up. We're about to have some debate here, or you're already in it. If you can adopt the shared future mindset that, oh, we're going to share a future together. I'm going to have to see her again. I'm going to have to work with this person again. I'm going to have to deal with this probably again and again through multiple more projects in the future. Everything will shift. You'll approach the conversation differently, more strategically, more thoughtfully when you keep the future in mind. Usually what happens in the moment of conflict, we just throw out the baby with the bathwater or whatever that phrase is. I don't even know. I still don't know. Why would you say that? But you understand what I'm saying? What happens is you just toss out the whole relationship because you're mad. And the ego goes into self-identity, disconnects from the other person and from the future, and just gets in fight and flight mode. From that place, we've already lost. So deciding and determining we're going to have a shared future mindset is important. And importantly, if we're talking about relationship or partner or spousal, conflict, somebody who you really love, if the two of you have in mind, a compelling future together, right? You have shared interests, shared goals, shared adventures coming up. If you can always ground your relationships in the reality that you're building something together, if that pre-exists, then moving into a conflict, you're more likely to resolve it more quickly and amicably, right? Research shows even just having a couple have a conversation about something they're interested in doing or something good coming up in their future before having them talk out a difficulty makes that difficulty or that conversation of conflict so much more smooth, so much more short, so much less accusatory. It changes everything. Grounding ourselves in the future, I think is important. Starting off the bat with relationships, thinking, I'll work with this person again. I'll see this person again. I'll care about this person again. It can change everything. It can really shift everything. The second phrase I would say here is respectful process. How many of you have ever been in a conversation, in a conflict, and you were just trying to be thoughtful and try to be calm, and the person you're dealing with was not respectful? All right. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of hands raised here in the Zoom, at least as we're doing this. It's very, very frustrating. And soon as we lose respect in the conversation process, all is fair game in war. And so it's a very challenging thing. We have to go into conflict situations, but adopt this philosophy overall. I'm going to treat people with kindness and respect, even if they don't treat you that way. For those who don't know my background a little bit, this is a topic I really love because, if you don't know, my master's degree was in communication studies, and I focus mostly on leadership communication. And in that process, though, I got to do a lot of mediation, and including peer mediation. So I was mediating, students in college having conflicts. I was mediating, professors and students, administrators and professors, local community members and administrators. Like, my job was literally two people come in a room, they are in conflict, they cannot resolve it, they've already tried, they do not like each other, and here they are. I even did some court-referred mediation, which in like a divorce case, they'd bring in the couple and I'd have to work with them. And mind you, I'm in my early 20s. And it was such a great training ground. I mean, for 2 years, I just got to see how terribly disrespectful people can be toward each other, even when they both want to solve it. And a big part of mediation was teaching people in advance of a conversation that this process, we were going to keep respectful, that the expectation was that this is going to be a respectful conversation, because otherwise we couldn't solve it. And they already usually knew that. I've done a lot of coaching, as you know, over the last 15 years. I'm a certified high performance coach. And over these 15 years doing it full time every single week, a lot of times I'm dealing with conflict situations and couples, or conflict situations between co-founders. And soon as it devolves into disrespect, it is 10 times harder to pull it back. It is so much more difficult. And so you'll hear me talk about how you can maintain that respectful stance with your partner or the person you're having conflict with, but also know that the expectation has to be had in advance of the conversation. Sometimes you react in the heat of the moment without stepping back and setting the frame for the conversation. As simple as, if you feel hooked or triggered, saying, you know, could we talk about this in like 30 minutes in a much more calm way? I just need to go reset. And coming back with the expectation and the conversation. Let's try this again. I want to be more respectful with you. I know that we love and care for each other, or I know that we need to work together, or I know that it hasn't been easy. So let's try this again. Let's try to do this with kindness and care for another, and we can solve this together. I know we can. A simple reset into the frame of respect can change the outcome as well. And the third phrase, so the first phrase was shared future mindset. The last phrase was respectful process. The third one is empathy and encouragement. Now, we all know about empathy, right? We all know we're supposed to listen, understand, feel, sense their thoughts and feelings. We're supposed to reflect back how they're feeling and what they're going through. We're supposed to validate, maybe not their beliefs, but validate them as a person. We're supposed to really feel their pain or walk in their shoes. You've heard these phrases before, right? Empathy, people know they should do that. But in conflict, common sense is not always common practice. And that's why we really wreck relationships. And empathy is one of those. Being an empathetic listener, we'll talk about how, is so important. But notice the phrase, empathy and encouragement. Do you know what in conflict also goes out the window? I said earlier, what goes out the window? Well, shared relationship and the future. Well, the ego also can't see and validate and praise the other person, which is exactly what they need. We forget, because we're hooked or we're upset or we disagree, that the other person is, if you're a spiritual person, a child of God, or the other person, has extraordinary potential, or the other person has been through a lot in their life, or the other person is struggling. And we forget that people actually need a lot of encouragement. And I know being in GrowthDay, you tend to be the person who is more encouraging in your relationships. We know that from our research. You tend to be the person who's usually more of the optimist or more of the leader position, that you're the person who's supportive of others, more kind of others, and yes, more encouraging of others. But we forget that when we're angry. Who's guilty? Okay, a few of us. Think about the last argument you had with somebody. Did you praise them? Did you encourage them to share? Did you say a kind word? Did you appreciate something about them? Most people don't. They're on the attack. They're on the offensive. They think they are at war and they must win at all costs. That's the ego. That's narcissism. That's sociopathy. You know what it is it's saying, I must destroy this person because it's a zero-sum game. Either they're evil and I'm good, or I'm right and they are wrong. And there is no in between. And what that does is it objectifies the other person into the category of darkness and bad versus recognizing human frailty, human suffering. It strips us away from that common humanity. And if we let that happen with every conflict situation, no wonder we live in a divisive world where it's accusatory, where it's blaming, where it's the worst assumption about the other person. When in reality, what we really need to do is remember the human struggle, remember their humanity. I know you all know this being GrowthDay members, but an encouraging word to somebody at the right time can change their lives. Let me ask this to you. Do you believe that it is true that some point in your life, somebody gave you some encouragement, maybe some praise, validation, respect, appreciation, honor? They kind of told you were capable and it changed your life. Did that ever happen for anybody here? Ever? When someone encourages you, it changes your life. Well, then can't you get to the logical conclusion that if you encourage somebody in a conflict situation, it could change the tone and outcome of the conflict? If a simple piece of encouragement can change someone's life, couldn't a simple piece of encouragement change the outcome of conflict? Boom, everything changes. The second you get that, like, whoa, encouraging another person in conflict could change the outcome, make them feel respected, make them believe in themselves, make them feel honored, make them feel appreciated, make them feel heard, make them feel validated in some way, even if at the content or topic level you disagree. This changes everything. When you can encourage another human and still debate a topic, now you're a mature adult. Before that, you're screwed. Forgive my language. Before that, you're locked into unconscious immaturity. And I don't say that flippantly. We've all been there. We've all lost our stuff in a conflict situation. We've all said things we regret. I'll remind you, no one here is trying to be perfect in GrowthDay. Our job is to prompt you with new ideas, new phrases, new mindset, new ways of thinking about things. But just think about this. The next time you're going to go have a strong or difficult or conflictual conversation with your partner or your spouse or someone you're in relationship with intimately, imagine if you just said, okay, we have a shared future together. I'm going to respect him or her in this process. And I'm going to make sure I encourage them a little bit. If you did those three things, if you entered it from those three frames, a very different energy happens in that relationship, a very different one. So a lot of these themes are going to come up. That was literally my first point. So all of that was my first point, which is the three primary phrases. Shared future mindset, making sure we have a respectful process and encouraging other. This will change everything. How do you motivate other people? I am asked this all the time. Most of you guys know I wrote the book, The Motivation Manifesto, but that was about how do you motivate you? Like, how do you motivate yourself? But I'm always asked by other people, well, I got a team, or I got a teenager, or I got my dud of a husband or wife who aren't excited and positive and optimistic. And Brendon, they're not into personal development. They got no motivation to do their job. They got no motivation to live their best life. How do I change them? So first, let me begin with this. Your job is not to change them. Your job is not to fix everybody else's problems in life. Your job is not to handle everyone else's train wrecks in their lives either. And I just say that with all due respect because often we get so frustrated with people because we feel like we should be able to change them. But often what I tell people is be careful with that. When I started my career as a writer and a personal development trainer and coach, 16 years ago, I remember I was so like motivated and driven and I wanted to help my family and all my friends. I wanted to, not fix everybody, but just inspire everybody to be their best. But you can't inspire everybody to be your best. Some people are into personal development, some people are into motivation, some people are in achievement, and some people aren't. And what I tell people often, and I'll give you some strategies you can use to actually motivate people, but I also want to give you permission right now to understand that you don't have to fix everybody. And not everybody has to be as ambitious, as driven, as optimistic, as into personal development and professional growth as you are. In other words, it's okay that other people have different ambitions for their life. I think that's critical to understand. I was so frustrated. I'm like, why don't you want to be a millionaire? Or why don't you want to be happy all the time? And some people, that's just not their mode, man. I just want to give you permission to understand you don't have to change everybody. I would get so frustrated when I got into personal development. I thought, why don't you want to become great? Why don't you want to become a millionaire? Why don't you want to be happy and joyous? Why don't you want to lead and contribute and serve? And some people are like, man, that's not my thing. And I was like, how can that not be their thing? But listen, just as much as you so desperately desire for other people to let you be you, for other people to let you do your own thing and take your journey the way that you want to take it and the way that you need to, you also must allow it out of others. And that is so hard to tell people, because I know maybe you're watching this video because you're a leader and you've got team and you need them to perform based on how you're compensated. Or you've got a teenager and you need that teenager to turn on or they're going to fail out of school. And I know it's important to put in the work, so I'm going to give you 4 ideas for how to motivate people right here in this video. But right off the bat, I am letting you off the hook too. You are not responsible for other people's energy. You are not responsible for their ambition. You are not responsible for them changing. Let life be their guide. Let life show them what's up. Let them discover their own path just as much as you've discovered your path. But I also know that if you're in my community, and we just call my community HPX, right? The high performance experience. We all want to experience that next level of life that's more vibrant and connected and excellence driven, right? And if you're in this community of HPX, you're like, Brendon, no, let me shape these humans. So let me give you some ideas for that. First rule of thumb in motivating other people. Always know this phrase. I often teach this as the 5 most important words in all of leadership. And that is, people support what they create. People support what they create. What this means is if you want to motivate someone to do something, they must be actively involved in shaping and creating the vision or the idea or the strategy or the planning for the thing. You can't just walk into a team and say, hey, everybody, do this, be motivated. They're like, what is this? What is this new idea? If they're not involved, then they're like often critical. And guess what people do when they're critical? Nothing. Guess what people look like when they're critical? Unmotivated. And what's happening is sometimes they're just full of doubt or uncertainty, or they don't get it because they didn't get to participate. If you want people to be motivated, you must invite them to participate. With no participation, no motivation, right? It's just like when you come to them with an idea, they're kind of like resistant sometimes. They're like, wait, what's this all about, man? But if you ask them a bunch of questions and they come up with the idea, you ever see them turn on? They're like, oh, I got this idea. And they get so excited about it. Yes, when they have the idea, they get motivated for it. So your job is to ask questions, not to be the person to tell them to be motivator, not try to be the motivator, but instead ask questions about their passions, their desires, their needs, their hopes, their problems. Connect with them empathetically and with curiosity. So ask them questions. What's real for you? What are you trying to do? What would you like to do? Oh, you like to do that? What would be your next steps? What might be something you can do? Ask more questions. Let them generate more ideas. As they generate more ideas, they feel like they're participating, and those ideas become theirs. And when someone has an idea that's theirs, they want to protect it, and they want to nurture it, and they want to make it happen because they got skin in the game. Versus you just saying, be motivated to do this thing, ask them to get involved. Participation. Now, I know you're going to say, but Brendon, they don't want to participate. It's because you haven't cued them correctly. You haven't asked them enough questions that were genuine questions, authentic questions, that were questions for them, not for you. Because there's a difference between asking for participation, asking for engagement, and seeking to manipulate. And that's why most people fail in motivating other people. Their intention is to get this person to this specific outcome, and that's what I consider them to be motivated. No, that's called you're trying to manipulate them to follow your path, your course, and be you. And we've all had people in our lives, you probably had a parent or caregiver, know someone who had an overly controlling parent. You don't want to overly control anybody. What you want to do is create greater freedom and belief with them by having them being in an active dialogue about their own goals, their own dreams. And when they're in an active dialogue with you, creating, generating ideas, brainstorming, that's going to create the energy that can later translate into real motivation. I hope that helps. Remember, people support what they create. Once you get that, everything shifts. Number two, if they've shared something or they have a vision or they have a goal, but they seem really unmotivated, often it's because they lack competency for getting there. What does that mean? It means they don't have the map. They don't know what to do. They have the hope, they have the idea, they have an ambition, but they literally don't know what to do on Monday. And when you lack competency, you often lack motivation. In fact, we know from my studies in high performance and in psychology that when you lack competency, you lack confidence. Well, if I don't feel confident towards something, obviously I'm less likely to be motivated to go for it, right? So you have to understand this important nature of competency and confidence. We call it the competence-confidence loop, right? The more someone has competency, and in this word I'm using today, competency, it means a collection of knowledge, skills, abilities, and talents that allows you to have the know-how to do something. Well, if you don't have the know-how to do something, you won't try. And if you don't try, you don't get the hit of confidence. But if you have the competency, the knowledge, skill, ability, and empowerment to do something, guess what happens? Oh, I take the step. Oh, I got some reward. I got some progress. I got some momentum here. I feel more confident. I'm more motivated to try again. So your job, if you really want to lead people or motivate people, is to ask them whether or not they have what they need to be able to do it. Do you know what you need to do? Should we brainstorm a plan? Do you need to get a skill? Do you need to get a mentor? Do you need to read some books on that? Do you need to take some courses on that? Because if they lack the know-how, why would you expect them to know to do? Follow? So it's important to empower people with competency. I'm always thinking about that. If I know what somebody wants, I'm like, what do you need for that? New tool, new training, new video, new insight, what? Your job is not to just motivate them with rah-rah words, but real empowerment. Give them the tools, the education, and the resources or access to those things. And once they have that, if you are a leader in like an organization, then think about this. You also have to empower them with what is essentially decision-making authority and trust. Meaning, if they kind of know how, you need to step back, mom, dad, leader of an organization, step back and let them mess it up and try. One reason people get demotivated is because as they're starting and they're in that hot mess mode of not knowing how it's going, the person trying to motivate them is judging them. Because guess what judgment does? It shuts people down. So you've got to let people experiment, try, be a hot mess, not get ahead. And as they're trying, you're celebrating the effort, not just awaiting the outcome. People need to be cheered on even when they're failing. People need to be cheered on even when they're stuck. And if you aren't actively providing them the tools, resources, education, decision-making authority, trust, or cheering on, well, no wonder they're not motivated. They feel disempowered. And when someone is disempowered, they're never going to have the goals, the dreams, and the drive that you want them to have or that they're even capable of. It's so important. And if you can't give it to them, cue it to them. Ask them, what books could you read? Ask them, what courses could you take? Send them videos, send them podcasts. If you're in my world, if you're in our HPX community, you guys know I am always giving resources on my podcast. Always giving resources on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram Lives. It's always like train. Take what was useful for you, leave what's not, but here's everything I got to help you with this. Like if people say, Brendon, you're motivating, it's because I'm always giving them resources and tools. I'm hopefully motivating them by empowering them. That's my goal versus just being the rah-rah guy who swears or cusses to get a little edge on you. Instead, I'm like, no, let's give you the real tools. And by doing that, I think it's made my career and this community in HPX very different. Third big idea for them, you've got to make sure that they've got some kind of like clear goals and rewards. And this is the hardest thing for people. It's like, if someone's lacking motivation, you can't just go up to them and say, you should have goals. They're gonna be like, shut up, I'm watching Netflix right now. It's like, it's hard. You've got to learn to pull that from them and learn to empower that. So it's like, if they don't have goals, you'd be like, well, if you had what you wanted in life and you were who you wanted to be, what would that look like? And then you got to kind of help step them backwards through it. Like, okay, I'd love to live in this town with this kind of house, with this type of person and this type of thing. Okay, let's work backwards. What would you have to do to earn that? What would you have to do to become that? Like, what's some goals you could set? Like, if you could start marching towards that, what's something you could do in the next 30 days to begin? And this is important. Don't think you're going to motivate people with super long-term goals. You know who are driven by really long-term goals or higher level goals, like often what we'll call mission or purpose? People who are already achievement driven. But people who are stuck and people who are unmotivated, man, they just need to make that first step or that first two. Start with a monthly goal. Stop thinking like, let's change your life. Let's talk about what's your 5-year vision? They're like, 5 years? 5 years? I don't know what I'm eating tonight, dude. They're overwhelmed. Overwhelm often leads to demotivated people. And often they're demotivated because they're trying to take on too much and they're not getting and celebrating or being compensated for the small steps, for the initial steps. And that's what's important for you to realize. You want to motivate people, help them recognize, realize, discover those small steps and set some rewards. Oh, okay, you're going to do that this month? Okay, let's pretend it's the 30th a month and you actually did it. How would you celebrate? I'd take my girlfriend out for a big dinner. Cool. Oh, I'd take a day off. Okay, cool. Oh, I'd go to that favorite place I like to go. Cool. Like, cheer that on. And then when you see them, listen, when you see them, you're not trying to just tell them to go do something. Instead, you say, so, are you going to get to go on that date with your girlfriend? Are you going to get to go to that favorite place? When you egg them on, you're actually encouraging them to achieve the thing they told you they wanted, not just asking them, work harder. Instead, have them see that short-term celebration, that short-term win. And in your dialogue with them, start talking about the win more than you're talking about the work. Because you're often telling them, work, be motivated. And instead, they want to talk about getting the thing, and that will motivate them. And that's not true for everybody. But for a demotivated person, they're more likely to be excited to talk about what they want than talking about the grind. I hope that makes sense. And then the last big idea, remember you're the role model. They need to see mom, dad, you leading and living with real motivation, with drive. And how do you do that? It's not about just seeing you work hard. What they need, if you want them to become more motivated, they need to be in dialogue about motivational things. So your job is to share more often and more consistently with this person you're trying to motivate your whys and your distinctions along the way. What I mean by that is you've got to share in a continual conversation, hey, I'm working towards this and I just learned that if I did it this way, it would get this outcome. And I thought, why didn't I know that before? So now I'm more excited to do it. You got to share that a lot. Like very consistently. You must share your journey and your lessons on that journey more with them if you want them to be motivated. But often you're embarrassed to do that because you don't want to feel like you're bragging, or you're worried about sharing those things because you think it will disempower them. They see you having so much and succeeding and moving ahead, and you don't want to bring it up to them because you think, oh, well, they'll feel awkward or weird or insufficient around me. First, let go of your ego about that. That's nonsense. Like, it's a beautiful thing that you get to share your journey with another person. If they ever say, I don't want you to share your journey and your feelings and your lessons learned in life with me ever again, then be like, okay, cool. But until they say that, you share it. And I want you to hear this, because I know a lot of you have this assumption in your mind that you can't share your successes with other people. Because the way you were raised, you thought, well, that's bragging. No, that is empowering the next generation. Like, why is it we have so many generation of young people struggling to be motivated right now? Because the people who already succeeded don't share, they don't mentor, they don't role model, they don't coach, they don't help. So they're left alone trying to figure it out on their own. We have entire generations that never passed on their great standards, their great learnings, their great drives, their great purposes. So we have a whole new generation reinventing the wheel. Reinventing the wheel is demotivating because we all want to start at speed. And the way to start at speed is having people around us share it. I am only here doing this for you because other people I would go to a conference and other people would stand on stage and go, I started just like you, but here's what I learned and here's what I did. And I'd get motivated saying, oh, they did it too? You need to be that role model for other people. And I really think that's important, that you are always sharing your journey. Stop hiding your journey. Stop hiding your love for personal development. Stop hiding your motivations. Stop hiding all those distinctions that you can pass on to somebody. And I want you to share it until they say stop. And that's my rule in life. And I'll tell you what's funny. I would say 50 people in my life, I've thought they don't want to hear about my journey and my successes and my struggles and what keeps me going and what I'm learning. And I used to say that to a lot of friends. I thought they don't want to hear this. And then you know what? Years would go by and they go, Brendon, I don't feel like I know you anymore. You never share what's going on. And I thought, oh, maybe if I shared what was going on, they'd have a different spark in their life. Your sharing can be their spark, my friend. People always ask me, Brendon, what do leaders actually do? Maybe you're leading a team, or you're in charge of a large organization, or you're just trying to even lead your own life. I mean, what is it that leaders actually do? Many of you know this was my graduate school work. In 2001, I wrote a book called The Student Leadership Guide, and I never had any clue that thing would blow up the way that it has. And this framework for leadership, it's called E6, is from that book, and it's been used at, I think, 40 of the top 100 schools in the world. Major corporations from around the world, major associations have called me in to speak on this topic because it's a great framework for leadership. It answers that question. What are the major practices of leadership that we must enact on a continual basis to be able to have the amount of influence and impact we desire in our work lives or in any role in which we're leading other people? So let's get right into it. The first E of these 6 E's is envision. Great leaders envision a compelling and different and vibrant future than what is here. They have an alternative, clear view of what the world could be like tomorrow than it is today, right? They have a shared purpose. They believe that they and others would be compelled by, interested in, inspired by, and want to work towards. And that's a big deal. And you always read about it in leadership, right? You have to have vision. I mean, it's biblical. Where there is no vision, people perish, right? We know the power of having that vision. So you have to sit down, though, and actually do it. The reason we say envision versus just have a vision is you have to sit. It's a practice of envisioning. What should tomorrow look like for my team? What should tomorrow be like for my business, for my organization? What should tomorrow be like for my life? And not just tomorrow, a long-term mindset and view, the dream right? That magnificent obsession, that bold desire, the moonshot goals and purposes and missions of life, the bigger picture, that's envisioning a different reality in the future than we experience today. And that's what everybody gets excited about in leadership. Where there's no vision, there's no leadership. Where there's no vision, people perish. So you have to envision. And I say that these are 6 practices of leadership and not 6 steps, because it's not like you do envisioning once and then you move on in the process. We always have to continually sit down and envision, where are we? Where can we be going? It's an active process. If you set a vision one time and you forget about it, it's not gonna help you accomplish the influence or the impact you want in your lifetime or in those that you lead. The second E here is enlist. As you're developing this vision, it's not just your vision, you're enlisting other people to share their voices, their perspectives, their dreams, their desires for where you could be going. You know, I think that the most important leadership lesson in the world is that people support what they create. If people are involved in the ideation of a vision, they're involved in creating ideas, of brainstorming, of figuring out what is it we are about, what do we stand for, where are we going? Great leaders enlist that from other people. They're constantly asking people what they think, how they feel, what things they desire and need. And it's that enlistment that is always going on. A great leader is always enlisting other people to believe in the dream, to shape the dream, to stay dedicated to the dream. It's an honest and an authentic and a genuine desire to see other people be involved in the process and to enjoy that process. I mean, it's so vital. And that methodology of how do you get people involved in that? You're asking questions. You're paying attention to their needs. You're reflecting back to things that you're hearing. You're always enlisting others to support and to build this vision, this ideal future together. And the third thing that great leaders are always doing is embodying their message. They stand for something. There's a congruence between who they are, the behaviors that they're enacting into the world, how they treat people, what they're working towards, and what they say is important, right? It's just basic line, it's integrity. You know, it's a congruence between what we say we're after and how we are behaving. And there's nothing more important, is there? You know, it's that old message, it's like, you don't believe the message unless you believe the messenger. So as leaders, we have to stand for and demonstrate and show and portray what we are really believing in. I mean, is our team and the people around us seeing us work for it, sweat for it, sacrifice for it, champion it over and over and over again, even when it's hard, even when there's conflict, even when people are pissed, even when people want to quit? Are you still there? Do you still stand for it? If you do, you become a legend. Fourth, what we have to move on to is now empowering people. Empowerment means we give people the decision-making authority and the trust to be able to work towards this vision, to allow them the autonomy, the strength, the input, to equip them with the knowledge, the skills, the abilities, the technologies, the tools, the training, to allow them to succeed as they march with us to achieving something extraordinary and phenomenal. That's vital. That's what empowerment is about. And a lot of leaders who come in with a big vision, they get everyone excited, you know, they seem like they want everybody involved, and they do a great job of standing for it, but they don't equip their teams to kick some butt. They never get to that place of real stride, of real momentum. And that happens all the time. Training other people and equipping them with everything they need to succeed has to be a vital practice of every great leader. And again, it doesn't happen just once. That's a huge failure in the working world, especially in corporate America. Great leaders come in, they nail the vision, they get people around it, they stand for something. But they only empower people at the beginning. They give some training and then they just disappear. Training has to be consistent, coaching has to be consistent, equipping people to deal with the new challenges, the new tools, the new technologies, the new competitive realities. That's vital. We have to have that in place, right? So we've been doing this practice. We envision a better future. We enlist other people to help shape that vision, to believe in that vision, to support that vision. We stand for something by embodying our own message. We empower other people to be able to support and to be able to win. Then we have to evaluate. It's one of the hardest things that we do in all of leadership, to evaluate the key people who are with us, their contributions, evaluate their skills, evaluate their needs, and to evaluate the ethics that are going on in our organization, in our team. Are we being excellent and are we being ethical? Is the questions that we're evaluating on, right? Are we being excellent and ethical as we are progressing? Which I guess would be the third question. Are we progressing? If not, why? Are we being ethical? If not, why? If our people are not being excellent, if not, why? These are the questions that we have to ask as this practice. And evaluation, it's like every day as a leader. You've got to keep your thumb on the pulse to see, hey, how are we doing? Are we alive? Are we moving forward? That evaluation also brings up the incredible challenge that we face as leaders, which is to give honest, direct, immediate, constructive feedback to those people who are trying to influence and lead. To our collaborators, to our friends, to our followers, whatever word that you use for them. I mean, it's vital. It's vital that we are paying attention and seeing when things are going off the rails. That we never check out. I mean, it's a consistent process of checking in and seeing how we're doing and paying attention to really evaluating the progress of our mission. And that final thing, that sixth thing, that thing that makes the magic, encourage. To encourage, to be the champion, to be the cheerleader, to be the person always motivating, inspiring, uplifting people, to never just have, a lot of leaders, they get their pet projects and they get excited about it and they disappear. No, man, you need to encourage on a continual basis. You need to light people up. You need to have it in your heart and in your soul, that desire to want to lift people up. To lift them up and to lift them off their butts, to get them excited about things, If you can't motivate them with your passion and your example, then what are we doing? You have to encourage people when this gets hard. When you're working towards a mission, it gets hard. Longer term, the more people involved, the bigger the organization, the bigger the vision, the bigger the dream, the longer the duration to accomplish it, the more struggle, the more challenge, the more conflict, the more discord, the more disappointment, the more frustration, the more doubt, the more delay. All those things happen. Leaders have to deal with them. And the way they have to deal with it is always being that encouraging voice. When the chips are down, when it looks most bleak, you're still that beam of light. And when it gets dark, when it gets challenging, when there's conflict and turmoil and turbulent seas, you're solid. You're somebody that they know they can go to because you're always going to turn a negative into a positive. You're always going to help them see the alternative view, the next step. You're going to champion people. You're going to champion the mission and the cause. That's leadership. That's the 6 E's of leadership. Envision, enlist, embody, empower, evaluate, and encourage. And I'll say what overlays all this is a philosophy about what we're doing. That it's important to us, that there's a purpose, there's a mission to it, that we feel that deeply within us is so powerful. And we honor, we respect, and we love those we work with. Last thought, I never use the word, I try to, maybe I use it in this video a little bit to give us context, but I try never to use the word follower. People aren't following you, they're actively engaged. They are collaborators. When you get people to collaborate with you in all areas of these 6 E's, you're building leaders, you're building collaborators within the organization, within the team, with those who you are serving, a magic happens. It's not just you, the leader, it's a group of us. We are a peer set of leaders. We are the movers and shakers who are shaping and making this mission happen every single day. We love to work together, we have fun, people are standing up. They now are helping come up with vision. They now are championing and cheering on, bringing in, enlisting other people. They now are doing they're standing for something. They're living that value and the truth. They now are empowering other people and championing the cause. They're your eyes and your ears evaluating how the organization, how the mission is going. They now are encouraging it so it doesn't just ride on your shoulders. When we do that right, then we have this thing called leadership. This can be your day for personal growth. This can be that day you committed to and you remember and you go, that was the day I got myself a community. I got better coaches. I committed to making my life the absolute best that I could. This is that day. Make today your growth day. Click the button on this page and sign up right now.